I woke up and found my 6-year-old daughter crying in the bathroom. My mother-in-law had cut her hair while she slept, almost to her scalp. Now she's not prettier than my real granddaughter, she laughed. I didn't yell. I stayed calm. The next morning, she was screaming. The sound that woke me wasn't an alarm. It was a hitch in the air, a tiny gulping sob that the house was trying to swallow. I laid there for a moment, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. My husband, Tom, was a log beside me, a dead weight in the bed we shared in his childhood home. We were visiting for the week, a mandatory sentence served every summer under the guise of family bonding. Another sob, small and sharp as a shard of glass. Lily. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards groaning a protest. The hallway was a tunnel of shadows, framed pictures of Tom's perfect family staring at me with silent judgment. His sister, Sarah, and her daughter, Chloe. Tom as a boy, beaming, never any of me or Lily. We were temporary guests, even after 8 years. The bathroom light was on, a pale yellow line bleeding from under the door. I pushed it open, and my world stopped. Lily was on the little step stool in front of the sink, her small hands braced on the porcelain. Her shoulders were shaking. In the mirror, her reflection was a stranger. Her hair, her beautiful, honey blonde hair that fell in soft waves to the middle of her back, was gone. It was hacked away, butchered in jagged, uneven chunks close to her scalp. Patches of pale skin showed through. On the floor, a cloud of her hair lay like a fallen halo. My stomach dropped through the floor. I felt the blood drain from my face. In the corner of the counter, I saw them. My mother-in-law's sewing scissors, heavy, steel, unforgiving. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Grandma Carol said, she said I looked like a boy now." I knelt beside her, my own hands shaking as I reached out, not wanting to touch the raw, ugly tufts. I pulled her into my chest, her small body trembling against mine. I could smell the stale, powdery scent of my mother-in-law on her. The violation of it made my throat tighten. I didn't need to ask. I knew. I had been fighting a war of attrition with Carol since the day Lily was born. A war of 1,000 tiny cuts, comments about Lily's weight, the way she'd buy Chloe designer dresses and hand Lily a cheap plastic toy from the dollar store. The constant, insidious comparisons. Chloe was spirited. Lily was difficult. Chloe was a natural beauty. Lily was cute in her own way. Family politics are their own kind of landmine, and I had spent years learning to tread lightly, to absorb the small explosions, to keep the peace. For Tom. Always for Tom, who lived in a state of willful blindness, whose mantra was, "That's just Mom. She doesn't mean anything by it." I held Lily and rocked her, my mind a blank wall of white-hot rage. But on the outside, I was ice. Waiting stopped being a choice. It was a verdict that had just been handed down. I carried her back to our room. Tom was still asleep, snoring softly. I laid Lily in my spot, pulled the covers over her, and sat in the chair in the corner, watching the slow gray light of dawn creep into the room. I watched my daughter's chest rise and fall. I watched the butchered landscape of her hair on the pillow, and I planned. There was no more peace to keep. There was only a debt to be collected. The next morning, I was up before anyone else. I made coffee, my movements deliberate and quiet. When Carol came into the kitchen, she was smiling, a smug, self-satisfied little twist of her lips. She was a small woman, but she took up all the air in a room. Her presence a heavy, suffocating blanket of perfume and judgment. "Morning," she chirped, pouring herself a cup. She didn't look at me directly. She never did when she'd just fired a shot. "Morning, Carol," I said. My voice was level, flat. She glanced towards the hallway. "The girl's still sleeping? I hope little Lily isn't too upset. Kids are so dramatic about haircuts." I just stared at her. I let the silence hang in the air, let it gain weight. You can feel a lie the way you can feel a storm coming. The air gets thick, heavy. Tom came in then, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, smells good." He kissed his mother on the cheek, then came to kiss me. I turned my head slightly so his lips landed on my hair. He didn't notice. "Where's Lilybug?" he asked, pouring cereal. Right on cue, as if summoned, Sarah and Chloe came downstairs. Chloe, a year older than Lily, was a miniature of her grandmother, all sharp angles and an unearned sense of superiority. Her long, perfect blonde hair was in an elaborate braid. Carol lit up. "There's my beautiful girl. Did you sleep well, sweetie?" Chloe nodded, preening. Sarah gave me a tight, knowing smile. She was a co-conspirator, a sycophant, who benefited from her mother's cruelty. And then Carol said it, loud enough for the whole room to hear, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh, I do hope Lily's all right. I just thought she needed a little trim. Her hair was getting so unruly. Now she and Chloe don't have to compete. Chloe's the pretty one again." She laughed, a sharp, ugly clink of a sound. Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He just stared down at his cereal bowl, as if it held the secrets to the universe. His silence was a weapon, and it was always aimed at me. That was it. The moment of clarity. The final piece of evidence in a long silent trial I had been conducting in my own head for years. I didn't care any more about keeping his peace. His peace was a cage. I stood up. "I'm taking Lily for a drive," I said. My voice was unnervingly calm. Carol waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be silly. We're all going to the club for brunch. I've already made reservations." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. "No," I said. It was a small word, but it landed in the kitchen like a grenade. Everyone froze. I had never said no to Carol before. Not ever. Tom looked up, his eyes wide with a flicker of panic. "Honey, let's not make a thing out of this." "The thing is already made," I replied, my eyes locked on his. "It was made last night, with a pair of sewing scissors." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I went to our room, gently woke Lily, and dressed her in her favorite dress. I found a soft, pretty beanie in her bag and carefully placed it over her head. She looked at me with those big, sad eyes. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my voice finally cracking. "Mommy's going to fix this, I promise." We walked out the front door, leaving the heavy, stunned silence of the kitchen behind us. I didn't look back. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, I saw Carol's face in the window, her mouth a tight, angry line. The battle had been declared. She thought she had already won. She had no idea I was about to change the rules of the war. The history of my marriage was written in concessions, small surrenders that, over time, amounted to a total rout. When Tom and I first got together, I thought his devotion to his mother was sweet. It was only after we were married that I realized it wasn't devotion. It was a form of capture. He was a willing prisoner in the world Carol had built, a world where she was queen, Sarah was the princess, and Chloe was the heir apparent. When I became pregnant with Lily, I was an interloper, a disruption to their carefully curated dynasty. The first sign of trouble was the nursery. I had spent months planning it, painting soft yellow walls and stenciling little stars on the ceiling. One weekend, while I was visiting my own parents, Carol and Sarah came over and redecorated. They painted over my yellow with a harsh, sterile white and replaced the simple wooden crib I'd chosen with an ornate, monstrous thing that looked like it belonged in a palace. "It's much more sophisticated," Carol had announced, beaming. "We just couldn't let you make such a tacky mistake." Tom had shrugged. "It was a surprise. They meant well, honey." He couldn't see the violation. He just saw a new crib. He didn't understand that they hadn't just painted over a wall. They had painted over me. After Lily was born, it escalated. Every choice I made was wrong. I was breastfeeding too long. Then I stopped too soon. I was too strict. I was too lenient. Lily's first word was "Dada," and Carol looked at me with triumph, as if she had coached the winning team. Chloe, who was born a year earlier, was the benchmark against which Lily was always measured and always found wanting. Chloe walked at 10 months. Lily walked at 13. "A little slow, isn't she?" Carol would murmur. "Chloe potty trained in a weekend. Lily took months." "Maybe you should be more consistent," she'd suggest, her tone implying I was failing at the most basic tenets of motherhood. Tom and I lived in a small house that his parents owned. It was another one of their gifts, a gilded cage that kept us tethered to them. "We just want to help you get started," his father, a quiet man who existed only to sign Carol's checks and nod in agreement, had said. But the help came with strings. Carol had a key. She would let herself in, rearranging my furniture, going through my pantry, and criticizing my brand of olive oil, leaving little notes with suggestions. It was a slow, methodical erosion of my identity. I became smaller and smaller, trying to make myself less of a target. I stopped arguing. I stopped having opinions about decor or vacation plans. I learned to smile and nod while my insides curdled with resentment. Because in my family, feelings are optional, but appearances are mandatory. My one non-negotiable territory was Lily. I tried to build a fortress around her, to shield her from the constant, low-grade poison. But I was failing. The poison was seeping through the cracks. Lily was becoming more withdrawn at her grandparents' house. She would cling to my leg, hiding from the forced comparisons and the cloying, over the top affection lavished on her cousin. Last Christmas was a masterclass in Carol's brand of psychological warfare. She had bought Chloe a custom made dollhouse, a perfect replica of their own sprawling home. It was the centerpiece of the living room, a monument to Chloe's status as the chosen one. For Lily, there was a box under the tree with her name on it. Inside was a single used book, a parenting manual titled Taming the Difficult Child. I saw red. I stood up, the book in my hand. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Carol feigned innocence. "Oh, I saw it at a yard sale and thought of you. It has some wonderful tips." Tom had pulled me into the kitchen. "For God's sake, don't make a scene," he hissed. "You're ruining Christmas." "She is humiliating our daughter," I whispered back, my voice raw. "She's trying to help. You're always so sensitive. You twist everything." Gaslighting wasn't just a tactic in this family, it was the primary language. I went to the bathroom and cried, my shoulders shaking with a frustration so deep it felt like it was dissolving my bones. I had let him convince me. I had apologized. I had smoothed things over, once again sacrificing my own dignity on the altar of his family's comfort. But the haircut was different. This wasn't a passive-aggressive gift or a snide comment. This was a physical act, a violation. She had put blades to my sleeping child's head to satisfy her own grotesque vanity. She had marked my daughter, branded her as less than. And in that moment, looking at Lily's shorn hair in the harsh light of the bathroom, all the years of small surrenders, of swallowed anger, of forced smiles, they ignited. The peacemaker in me died. And something else, something cold and hard and sharp, was born in her place. After I drove away from the house, I didn't have a destination. I just drove. Lily was quiet in the back, watching the world go by. I stopped at a diner, a place with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of old coffee. I ordered Lily pancakes with extra whipped cream and chocolate chips. She picked at them, her face still shadowed with a sadness that broke my heart. "Mommy," she said, her voice small, "is my hair ugly now?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "No, baby, your hair is just hair. It will grow back. You are beautiful because of who you are inside. You are kind and smart and funny. That's what makes you beautiful, and no one can ever, ever cut that away." She gave me a small, watery smile. It was enough. My phone had been buzzing incessantly. "Tom." I ignored it. Then a text from Sarah. "You are being so childish. Mom is really upset. You need to come back and apologize. Apologize." The word was so absurd, it was almost funny. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest. I swallowed it down. My anger was a resource now, and I couldn't afford to waste it on hysterics. It needed to be channeled, focused. It needed to become a weapon. I needed an ally, and I knew exactly who to call. My own mother had passed away years ago, but her older sister, my Aunt Joan, was still very much alive. Joan was the matriarch of our side of the family, a retired judge with a spine of steel and a bank account to match. She and Carol had met once, at my wedding, and the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. Joan saw right through Carol's saccharine facade. She'd pulled me aside at the reception and said, "That woman is a piranha in a pearl necklace. Watch your back." I had thought she was being dramatic. Now I knew she was being prophetic. I paid for the pancakes, and we got back in the car. I drove to a park, let Lily play on the swings, and I made the call. "Joan, it's me. I know who it is," she said. Her voice was like gravel and whiskey. "You only call me when the house is on fire. So, what's burning?" I told her everything. The years of little cruelties, the Christmas incident, and then the haircut. I choked up as I described finding Lily in the bathroom. I expected sympathy, maybe some comforting words. That's not what I got. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "And what are you going to do about it?" Her voice was cold, clinical. It was the voice of a judge, not an aunt. I don't know," I stammered. "I just left. I have Lily with me." "Leaving is a tantrum," Joan said sharply. "Justice is a plan. Did your husband defend you?" "No." The word was a lead weight in my mouth. "Of course not. The apple doesn't fall far from the poison tree. All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop crying. Your tears won't help your daughter. Your brain will. Now, you said you live in a house they own, correct?" "Yes." "Is your name on the deed?" "No. It's in a trust or something. Tom's dad set it up." A pause. "A trust," she repeated, her voice charged with a sudden, intense interest. How fascinating. Tell me everything you know about this trust. And that's when a memory sparked. A few years ago, I had been looking for our passports in Tom's home office. I had opened a filing cabinet, and in a folder marked Family Estate, I had seen a thick document, the Miller Family Irrevocable Trust. I'd only glanced at it, but I remembered seeing my name and Lily's and Chloe's. Tom had come in and snatched the folder away, saying it was boring legal stuff I didn't need to worry about. Boring legal stuff is where the bodies are buried, Joan said when I told her. You need to get your hands on that document. Can you get back into the house without them knowing? A plan began to form, cold and clear in my mind. Yes, I said. They're all at brunch. They'll be gone for hours. Good. Go now. Get the document. Get Lily's birth certificate, your marriage license, your passports, and any financial statements you can find. Take pictures of everything with your phone. Then take the original trust document. Don't leave it there. Meet me at my lawyer's office at 3 o'clock. I'll text you the address. And for God's sake, turn off your phone. Let them sweat. She hung up. I looked over at Lily, who was now at the top of the slide, her face hesitant. You can do it, sweetie, I called out. She slid down, landing in a heap in the sand, a huge grin on her face. My daughter was learning to be brave. It was time for her mother to do the same. You don't need armor to fight a war like this. You need evidence. Getting back into the house felt like a covert operation. My heart was hammering in my chest as I used my key on the back door. The house was silent, but it felt charged, like the air after a lightning strike. I told Lily we were playing a spy game, that we had to be very quiet and fast. Her eyes lit up with excitement, the trauma of the morning temporarily forgotten in the thrill of the game. I left her in the living room with my tablet and a pair of headphones, and I went straight to Tom's office. The filing cabinet was locked. Of course it was. Funny what urgency does when it's tied to self-preservation. I found a letter opener on his desk and jimmied the cheap lock in under a minute. My hands weren't even shaking anymore. I was a machine on a mission. The family estate folder was right where I remembered. I pulled it out. My breath caught in my throat. I sat down on the floor and began to read. It wasn't just a simple trust. It was a complex legal structure set up by Tom's grandfather, a man I'd never met, who was apparently much shrewder and fairer than his descendants. He had put several properties, including the one we lived in and their own primary residence, plus a significant stock portfolio, into an irrevocable trust. The beneficiaries were his grandchildren, Tom and Sarah. But there was a crucial stipulation. Upon the birth of their own children, the great-grandchildren, the term shifted. The trust's income was to be used for the health, education, and welfare of all the great-grandchildren. And upon the youngest great-grandchild turning 21, the entire trust was to be dissolved and its assets divided equally among them. Lily and Chloe. They were the true beneficiaries. Carol and Tom's father were merely the trustees. They were meant to be stewards of this money, guardians of their granddaughters' futures. My hands started to tremble again, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with a cold, righteous fury. I started digging deeper. Tucked into the back of the folder were bank statements for the trust. I spread them out on the floor. The numbers told a story of breathtaking greed. There were massive, regular withdrawals listed as management fees paid directly to Carol. There were payments to a luxury car dealership for Sarah's new SUV. There were tuition payments for Chloe's expensive private school, which was allowed. But there were also payments for Chloe's horse, her multiple trips to Europe for cultural education, and thousands of dollars spent at designer boutiques. For Lily, there was nothing. Not a single withdrawal for her benefit. Not for her preschool, not for her dance classes, not for a college fund. They weren't just favoring Chloe. They were actively stealing my daughter's inheritance. They were plundering her future to fund their present, the haircut. It wasn't just a random act of spite, it was part of a larger pattern. They were trying to erase her, to diminish her, to make her seem so insignificant that no one would ever think to question why she was receiving nothing while Chloe received everything. If they could convince everyone, including Lily herself, that she was worthless, then their theft would go unnoticed. I felt a wave of nausea. I had been living in a house that belonged in part to my daughter, while the people entrusted with her future were robbing her blind. And my husband knew. He had to know. His signature was on some of the withdrawal slips, co-signing as a future beneficiary, approving the expense. He was complicit in the theft against his own child. I took my phone and photographed every single page: the trust document, the bank statements, the withdrawal slips, dozens and dozens of photos. Ink beats opinions, facts beat feelings. I had an arsenal now. I gathered up the original trust document, along with our personal papers, and stuffed them into my bag. I grabbed a few of Lily's favorite things, a change of clothes for both of us, and walked out of that house without a second glance. I wasn't a guest leaving a visit. I was an escapee fleeing a prison, and I was never, ever going back. The lawyer's office was in a sleek downtown skyscraper that smelled of lemon cleaner and expensive ambition. My Aunt Joan was already there, sitting in a leather chair like she was on a throne. She stood up when she saw me, her eyes immediately going to the beanie on Lily's head. Her face, usually a mask of judicial neutrality, tightened for a fraction of a second. "This is Eleanor Vance," she said, gesturing to a woman who rose from behind a massive mahogany desk. Miss Vance was tall, impeccably dressed, and had an aura of calm, lethal competence. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered a handshake. It was firm. "Please, sit," she said. "Joan has given me the broad strokes, but the devil and the case is in the details." For the next 2 hours, I laid out the story. I showed her the photos on my phone. I handed her the original trust document. She read through it, her expression unreadable. Aunt Joan listened, interjecting only to ask sharp, clarifying questions. When I was finished, Miss Vance leaned back in her chair. She looked at Joan, then at me. "This isn't just a family dispute," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the force of a battering ram. "This is a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty. It's embezzlement. It's fraud. What they have done is not just morally reprehensible, it is highly illegal." A weight I didn't even know I was carrying started to lift from my shoulders. The word illegal. It was a validation. I wasn't being sensitive. I wasn't overreacting. I was a victim of a crime. My daughter was. "So what happens now?" I asked. Miss Vance steepled her fingers. "Now, we formulate a plan. We have 2 routes, criminal and civil. We can go to the district attorney with this, and they could face jail time. Or we can handle this civilly, which would be faster and would focus on recovering the assets and removing them as trustees." Aunt Joan spoke up. "We do both, but we start with the civil threat. The possibility of criminal charges will be our leverage. We need to move quickly to freeze the trust's assets before they can hide them." Ms. Vance nodded in agreement. "My thoughts exactly. We will file an emergency petition with the probate court tomorrow morning. We'll ask for an immediate injunction, the appointment of a temporary independent trustee, and a full forensic accounting of the trust going back to its inception." She turned to me. "This will get ugly. They will paint you as a gold-digging, vindictive spouse. They will lie. They will try to use your husband against you. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of Lily's face in the mirror. I thought of her small, trembling shoulders. I'm prepared for anything. The plan was set. Ms. Vance and her team would work all night preparing the legal filings. The first step was to serve them notice, a formal declaration of war. "Serving them at home is one option," Ms. Vance said, "but it's private. It allows them to control the narrative. Is there an opportunity to do it more publicly?" A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "As a matter of fact, there is. My sister-in-law is hosting a party this weekend, a big one. To celebrate my niece winning some regional dance competition, the whole family will be there, all their friends, everyone they care about impressing." Aunt Joan let out a low chuckle. "Perfect! A public shaming, very biblical. I approve." "We'll have the process server meet you there," Ms. Vance said, already making notes. "It will be a shock and awe campaign. Hit them where they are most vulnerable, their reputation." I left that office feeling like a different person. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was no longer a victim begging for scraps of decency from their table. I was the agent of their reckoning. I checked into a hotel with Lily, paid for with a credit card Aunt Joan had pressed into my hand. I turned my phone back on. There were over 50 missed calls from Tom and a string of increasingly frantic, then angry, texts. "Where are you? Call me now. This is insane. You're scaring everyone. Mom is crying. I hope you're happy. If you don't bring my daughter back right now, I'm calling the police." I read the last one and laughed. "Go ahead," I said to the empty room. "Please do. I have a few things I'd like to tell them." The day of the party was bright and sunny, a perfect summer afternoon. The kind of day that makes you believe nothing bad can happen. Sarah and her husband lived in a sprawling new build in a soulless subdivision, the kind of house with a three-car garage and no personality. I spent the morning with Lily at a salon. I'd found a place that specialized in kids' cuts. A kind woman with pink hair talked to Lily gently, then expertly shaped what was left of her hair into a chic, adorable pixie cut. With a little sparkly clip above her ear, she looked less like a victim and more like a tiny, defiant rock star. When she saw herself in the mirror, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. The light was back in her eyes. "I look cool, Mommy," she said. "You look like the coolest kid in the world," I said, my throat tight. I had arranged for Aunt Joan to watch Lily for the afternoon. I couldn't have her there for what was about to happen. This fight was for her, but it wasn't for her to witness. I drove to the party alone. I had on a simple black dress. I felt like I was attending a funeral. In a way, I was. The funeral of my old life. When I walked through the side gate into the backyard, the party was in full swing. White tents, a caterer, dozens of people milling around a pristine blue pool. It was a tableau of suburban success. Carol was holding court near the dessert table, laughing her tinkling false laugh. Sarah was flitting about like the hostess of the year. Tom saw me first. His face was a mixture of relief and anger. He rushed over, grabbing my arm. "Where have you been? What the hell is going on?" I was about to file a missing persons report. I pulled my arm away. "Don't touch me." My voice was quiet, but it stopped him cold. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, his eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching. "You have put this family through hell. You have no idea what hell is," I said, "but you're about to." Carol descended on us, her face a mask of practiced concern. "There you are! We were all so worried! You poor thing! You must be exhausted from all this drama." She was already spinning the narrative. I was the unstable, dramatic one. "Where's Lily?" Sarah asked, joining the circle. "Don't tell me you left her in the car." "Lily is safe," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "She's somewhere you can't hurt her." Carol gasped, placing a hand on her chest. "Hurt her? We would never! How can you say such a thing?" The performance was flawless. The concerned mother-in-law, the worried husband, the protective sister. Anyone watching would see a troubled young woman lashing out at her loving family. But the audience was about to get a new script. Just then, a man in a nondescript suit walked through the gate. He moved with a quiet purpose, his eyes scanning the crowd. He spotted me and gave a subtle nod. The process server. Ms. Vance had timed it perfectly. He walked directly up to our little group. "Carol Miller?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Carol looked confused. "Yes?" "You've been served," he said, handing her a thick manila envelope. He then turned to Tom. "Thomas Miller?" He handed him an identical envelope, and then to Sarah. "Sarah Jennings?" Their faces went from confusion to disbelief. They stared at the envelopes in their hands as if they were venomous snakes. "What is this?" Tom demanded, his voice rising. "It's a petition filed with the probate court," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden lull of the party. People were starting to stare. "It's for the immediate removal of Carol Miller and Frank Miller as trustees of the Miller Family Trust. It's also a notice of lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and embezzlement of funds intended for my daughter, Lily Miller." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ice clinking in people's glasses. Carol's face went pale. Not just pale, but a waxy, translucent white, the color of death. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. Sarah's mouth fell open. Tom looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. That's not possible," Carol stammered. "It's a private family matter." "You made it my matter when you stole from my child," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity I had never possessed before. "And you made it my business when you took a pair of scissors to her head while she was sleeping." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Carol's eyes darted around, seeing the shocked and judgmental faces of her friends, her neighbors. Her entire world, the carefully constructed facade of perfection, was crumbling in real time. "You're lying!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "She's making it all up. She's unstable." "Am I?" I asked calmly. I held up my phone. "Because I have copies of the bank statements. The withdrawals for your cars, your vacations, your designer clothes, all from the account meant for your granddaughter's futures. An account you took thousands from for Chloe and not one single cent for Lily. It's all there, in the documents you were just served. And I'm sure the forensic accountant the judge is about to appoint will find even more. Tom finally found his voice. This is a mistake. We were going to tell her. It was a temporary loan. A loan? I laughed, a real humorless laugh. Did you take a loan on Lily's hair too? Was that just temporary? Sarah started to cry, big theatrical sobs. You're ruining my party. You're ruining everything. You built your lives on a foundation of lies and theft, I said, my voice dropping. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just turning on the lights. I looked at Tom. I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had stood by and watched his family systematically dismantle my spirit and harm our child. There was nothing left. No love, no pity, just a vast, empty space. You'll be hearing from my divorce attorney on Monday, I said to him. Then I turned my back on all of them, on their pale faces, their frantic denials, their shattered reputations, and I walked away. I didn't run. I walked, my head held high, through the silent, staring crowd. I felt their eyes on my back, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care what any of them thought. I was free. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Just as Ms. Vance predicted, the judge granted the emergency injunction. Carol and her husband were removed as trustees, and a court-appointed fiduciary took control of the trust's assets. The forensic audit revealed that they had embezzled over $250,000. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the threat of criminal charges, they settled. They had to sell their home, the one Carol had lorded over me for years, to pay back every cent they had stolen, with interest. They also had to pay all the legal fees. The financial ruin was devastating for them, but the social ruin was worse. Their friends, the ones who had witnessed the scene at the party, abandoned them. Their carefully crafted world of privilege and respectability evaporated overnight. They became pariahs. Tom fought the divorce, of course. He tried everything. He begged, he threatened, he tried to claim I was an unfit mother. But I had the evidence, and I had Aunt Joan and Ms. Vance in my corner. He ended up with supervised visitation and a hefty child support order. He sold the house we had lived in, the house that was now rightfully half-owned by his daughter, and gave me my share of the equity. I took that money, and I bought a small sunny apartment in a different city, far away from the ghosts of my old life. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was ours. Every wall, every piece of furniture was chosen by me and Lily. It was a sanctuary. Life became quiet. It became boring in the best possible way. We had dance parties in the living room. We baked cookies on rainy afternoons. We read stories in bed. Lily started at a new school and blossomed. She made friends. Her hair grew back, thick and wavy, but she decided she liked it short. The pixie cut became her signature look. She was confident. She was happy. She was safe. I never heard from them again, directly, though sometimes I'd get a second-hand report from a distant cousin. Carol was a bitter, broken woman. Sarah's marriage fell apart under the financial strain. Tom drifted, never really landing. They never apologized. They never took responsibility. They just regretted getting caught. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the bathroom, the sight of my daughter's hair on the floor, and I feel a flicker of that old, white-hot rage, but it doesn't consume me anymore. It's just a scar, a reminder of a battle that was fought and won. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for the little girl who needed her mother to be a warrior. I did it so she would never, for 1 second of her life, believe she was worth anything less than everything. I did it for our quiet, boring, beautiful peace. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.